So there's this site that I like that I learned about in school. Maybe it's common knowledge. It's called RapidAPI. And in school, we had to use an API in our project. So they recommended going to this website to be inspired. And I just went through this site again, and there's so many APIs. Like, if you're looking to build a project and you don't know where to start, I would say look at these APIs and get some ideas from it. Like, there's this category of top APIs for Instagram, and you can use it to, pull out data from your social media account, get statistics from it, like age and sex, ethnicity. And so for me, it kind of sparked some ideas of like future projects I could do. But today I wanted to do a project or a tutorial using the dad jokes API. So I ended up, I went to the most popular, and free is good, best free APIs. And yeah, so I went to recommended APIs and I found dad jokes here. So I created an account with RapidAPI and I choose which API I want to use, and it's going to go ahead and just generate an API key for me. So in order to use it, I had to go to pricing and subscribe to it. So there was a little button here that said subscribe. And then, of course, if I want to change my plan, I can go here, but I'm not actually going to build a project with this. I just want to do a tutorial, so I just subscribed to the basic one, and I get 50 jokes a day. 50 random jokes a day, and my joke count is unlimited. Yeah, so if you try to use these endpoints and you haven't subscribed, you're going to get a forbidden notification. So if you end up getting that, just remember, come back to this section here. But, so if I look at, here and I can get my endpoint, they have, which is really nice, a example of the code snippet of what you would use if you wanted to get this data. And then it'll show you what the response is going to look like. So it'll have your joke, your punchline, or the setup, and then the punchline. So I'm not going to use Axios today. I normally would, but just for this tutorial, I'm not going to run it. I'm going to just do browser side. So it's going to be, let me get rid of that. It's going to be easier for me to get the data that I want by using fetch. So starting off, I'll just Google fetch API. And because I'm going to have to pass in headers of the API key and the API host, in the documentation, I'll scroll. Let me go to the using API. I'm going to want to do more than the basic, and I'll do something along this line. So I do want to accept a second param. I could just copy this one and then just remove a lot of that stuff, but this looks so much more basic. So let me just start off with this. I'm going to rename this to like get dad joke. And my second param here, you can see how you pass that in. You do await fetch. You do the URL. So let's go back to this and copy that URL. we'll do open brackets. And then what we want is, like you can see here, is the headers. So I'll just copy that, stick that in here. And because I don't want to expose my API key, I went ahead and I put it in my local storage and I pulled it out with this get item function. So I'll go ahead and just put my API key here. And let's just immediately call this so that when I refresh, you can see it in the console. Here, you've got, this is an interesting joke. Anal swabs are made compulsory for, okay, these are weird. These dad jokes are really weird. Okay. Okay, so how do we use this data? How do we get it into a website or a page? I went ahead and I created an index.html file and I linked my JavaScript file to it in the head. And then, of course, I labeled it dad jokes here. So the easiest way I think would be, depending on your project, but for this, I'll go ahead and do a button. So we'll just see like button HTML. Easy. You just have your opening HTML tag, button, and we'll do, get dad joke. Go back to that, and there's our little button that does nothing. So what we want to do is whenever we click this button, get dad joke, we're going to want underneath it maybe like a P tag or an H1, depending on whatever your project looks like. But for me, I think for this tutorial, we'll go ahead and we'll have a P tag that shows the joke, the setup, and then maybe give about 3 or 4 seconds before we show the punchline. First thing that I will do is connect these buttons. So to do that, we'll just do an onclick. Since this is just pure vanilla JavaScript, we're going to just do onclick on the HTML. And you can see that we pass this in. We pass that inside of the button tag. And what did we name our function? Get dad joke. We'll just copy that, get dad joke, make sure we call it, and oops, let's close that. That was obnoxious. So whenever this button is clicked, it's going to run get dad joke. So let's go ahead and not, so the way we had it before is it was calling itself so that anytime their page refreshed, it would run this function, but we're gonna wait until the button is pushed to call it. And let's just get rid of all of this for now and just test that that works. So I like to do just a little quick alert or console log that just says, button was pressed, just to know that I set that up properly. Little steps one by one. Makes things easier to debug if you know exactly where you go wrong. Okay, so that works. We'll just back out and go back to this. We'll go ahead and just get rid of that console log and we're going to use inner HTML to get it to show up on the page. And let's see. Yeah, what we'll end up doing is we'll just attach this .html equals and what we want that to equal. We can see here. Okay. So I'm just going to put this p tag, show you where it is. It's going to show up right here. We don't actually want it to say that. So we'll just leave that empty for now, and we'll go back to our JavaScript file, and we want to get the element by ID or element by class. Let's call this one the setup. So the setup of the joke is going to be here, and I'll just go ahead and get this ready for our punchline. Okay, so getting element by ID is right here. Document.get element by ID, and the ID is setup. And then back to this inner HTML. Just to test out that inner HTML, we could test it out by writing something in here and just saying, you know, when get dad joke is called, it's not going to do anything with this at the moment. It's just going to get element by ID, and it's going to put test in that ID of setup, so in our p tag. So when I click, oh, let me refresh. When I click, there we go, test. So instead of having test show up, we want to have our joke. And you know what? We need to see what that JSON data object looks like again, because we're going to end up putting that right here. So let's refresh that. Okay, so looking at this object, okay, so body is an array. So to get the punchline and the setup, we're going to have to access element 0. So it's going to be JSON data dot body here at element 0 dot punchline if we wanted the punchline, and dot setup if we wanted the setup. So let's make sure that that works. So JSON data dot body, and then because it's an array, we need to access that first element, and then punchline. Let's copy this. I do Shift Option down, and then I'm gonna type in setup. So now when I refresh, I should only see those two, the setup and the punchline being logged. And there we go. What do you call a tree you see twice? Deja vu. You know, I don't really get these jokes. Like, maybe I'm not funny. I'm just not funny enough. Okay. Next thing that we are going to do is put that setup here. So I could just copy this whole thing and stick it in here. Oop. Wait, that didn't copy properly. Let's copy this properly. I'll get rid of that. So why wasn't Bill Murray cast as Thor? Because nobody likes an electricity bill. Yeah, didn't get that one either. Okay. I like to just stick to make things cleaner. I'm just gonna put it in a variable called setup. Let's copy this again. And then I'll just put setup here. Really just a preference thing. It doesn't matter either way. I think maybe it makes it a little bit cleaner, maybe a little bit easier to understand. Okay, then the second thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna have the punchline right underneath it, right? So the punchline is going to be here. What do you call a cow with no legs? And there's a punchline, ground beef. Wow, okay. That was kind of funny. Okay. Okay, but again, we don't want to have that there. We want it to be dynamic. We want it to show up when we click the button. So I'm just gonna copy this because we know that's the punchline. And const punchline. And then again, I'm just gonna copy, but of course you gotta be careful when you copy and make sure that you update everything you need. So instead of having setup, get element by ID of setup, we're gonna do get element by ID of punchline. And what we want to show up in the HTML is not setup, but punchline. All right, so when I refresh that and I get my dad joke, what do you call an Italian? These are too much. These are all like not safe for work. All right, and I wanna just hold off on showing the punchline. I want to give it about, 3, 4, 5 seconds. Let you really think about that. I mean, I would probably need like 30 seconds to come up with the answer, but just for the tutorial purposes, we're gonna just give it a few seconds. And the best way to do that is to use setTimeout. Let me get rid of all these. All right, so you can use the setTimeout, which is a timer that executes a function or a specific piece of code when the timer expires. So we're gonna pass in whatever code or function that we want it to execute, and then the delay. And the delay is gonna be in milliseconds. So if I scroll down, I can see here that, this is what it looks like. Let me just copy that. I'm gonna put this all in my function still, and what we want to execute is this whole thing. So instead of having a console log here, well, we can go ahead and just see how this works before we get into it. So what it's doing here is it's gonna wait a second, and it's gonna say in the console here, delayed for 1 second. There we go. So instead of having this, let's put this in here. And we'll give it 3 seconds. Let's refresh. What do you call a crab holding a basket of tampons? Okay, crustacean menstruation station. Okay, I'm waiting for a really funny joke, but I feel like dad jokes aren't really that funny. Okay, so that's how you connect to the Dad Jokes API and use inner HTML, setTimeout, get element by ID. Hopefully all these concepts I've made easy to understand. Reach out to me if you have any questions or comments. A better dad joke maybe that'll make me laugh. I don't know. All right, thanks for watching.